करता ओम नमो हरिहंताणम सिद्ध प्रभु ना दर्शन करता ओम नमो सिद्धाणम आचार्यों ने वंदन करता ओम नमो आयर्याणम उपाध्याय ने वंदन करता ओम नमो उपाध्यायाणम सर्व साधु ने वंदन करता नमो लोए सब साहूणम सम्यक दर्शन मुझने मर्जो देसो पंचन मुक्तारो सम्यक ज्ञान मुझने मर्जो सर्वा पाप परासनो सम्यक चारित्र मुझने मर्जो मंगलानं च सर्वेषु नवपदनी आराधन करता परमं अभय मंगलम परमं अभय मंगलम परमं अभय मंगलम
Jai Jinendra, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this cold, wet Wednesday evening. On behalf of Oshwal Business and Professional Network, we welcome you to the 5th webinar in our series on careers. Today's topic is psychology, and I'm delighted to hand over to two professionals, Hanisha and Sajni. I'm not going to waste any more time, and I'll let them tell you about their journey and share with you lots of valuable tips and guidance. Over to you, Sajni and Hanisha.
Thank you, Smitha, for that lovely introduction. My name is Sajni, and I'm currently an assistant psychologist working in the NHS. And Hanisha?
Hi everyone, I'm Hanisha and I'm a business psychologist currently working at a psychometric assessment company. All right, so for today's session, during this webinar, we're going to be covering a few different things. Firstly, what is psychology? We're going to talk a little bit about what our journey was to our current roles, a little bit about the day in our lives, what a day looks like for us as assistant psychologists and a business psychologist. Talking about a little bit about some extracurricular activities that we've done in the past, transferable skills and how they can be applied to the workplace, a future of where we can go in our careers after this, and towards the end, just a little bit about what we wish we knew when we first got started, slash some advice. And then we'll open up at the end to some questions. Okay, so before we go into what is psychology, we've got a couple of questions for you all. If we can get the first poll question, please. All right, so how familiar are you all with psychology? You've got, I know a bit. Right. No one yet claiming that they know everything. No one yet claiming that they know nothing. All right, so we've got a few, I know a bit, so that's a good starting point. We have another question for you all. If we can get to the next question, please. Now, as psychologists, a very important question that we have for you all is, do you think we can read minds?
Oh, who said no? We definitely can, can't we?
It's the first thing we learn. Everyone's being very sensible. We have a yes. They know the truth. They know what we truly know. Couple yeses. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's head on to what the actual definition of psychology is.
So no, unfortunately, we can't read people's minds, although I don't know if I would want to read people's minds. So, according to the BPS, so BPS is the British Psychological Society. That's where you get a lot of the information from. They define psychology to be the scientific study of the mind and behavior, exploring how people think, feel, and act, encompassing everything from the brain processes and emotions to social interactions and mental illness, using scientific methods to understand, predict, and influence behavior for improved well-being in various fields like healthcare, education, and business. Basically, we do a lot for a lot of things. So I thought it would be a really good idea to share my journey into how I became an assistant psychologist. So I did the general GCSEs, picked what I really liked, and I was kind of wondering, well, what do I want to do? And instead of doing A levels, I decided to do International Baccalaureate. For those who haven't heard of it, it's more difficult. You end up picking 6 subjects, which I won't bore you into, and additional philosophy and theory of knowledge with an extended essay. So a lot of studying you got to go. Next, I decided to do a gap year. So within my gap year, I decided to do an apprenticeship in early years. So I knew I wanted to work with children, but I didn't understand in what capacity. And within the apprenticeship, I got to learn firsthand how important it was to interact with children, what kind of early development was needed, and also it was quite fun and I enjoyed it. Next, I went to university where I did quite unique combinations. So at Bath University, I was allowed to do a major in psychology and a minor in music. I absolutely love music, so I was really grateful I was able to combine those subjects. But actually, music has so much psychology utilized in it, and vice versa. Next, in my 3rd year, COVID started, so unfortunately there wasn't that many jobs out there, but I decided to start volunteering in Royal National Orthopaedic Hospitals to kind of get an insight of what NHS is like and get an understanding of, well, where could I go and what could I do? Next, I moved on to do a master's. I did a master's in child and adolescent mental health at UCL, where it gave me more understanding behind research, understanding about what kind of mental illnesses there could be out there, what kind of support a person would need. And the field is so big and broad, especially within the clinical world. I next moved on to becoming a special needs teaching assistant. I realized after masters there was so many jobs that I tried to apply for, but I wouldn't meet the experience levels or the criteria. So I just thought I needed to just get a job that I really enjoyed. Working within this job, I was working as a special needs teaching assistant for a special needs school. So I got hands-on experience with mental health conditions or physical conditions, which helped guide me to understand where my passions really lie. I next moved on to my first role as an assistant psychologist, where I was working in generic CAMS. So normal CAMS. CAMS is the child and adolescent mental health units for under 18s. So whenever a young person under 18 is referred into NHS for mental health support, that's where they would come. And this is where I would start doing my therapy, research, data, all sorts. But I'll come into what I do in my day-to-day role, and I am currently in my current role in the targeted team, which is a trauma and attachment service, which I'll explain in a bit later. But so far, that's my journey into the role of being an assistant psychologist.
Great, thanks, Sajni. So moving to my journey, a slightly different journey going into my role as a business psychologist. So I also did the standard sort of GCSEs, but I went into doing the more standard A levels. I did psychology, sociology, and maths. But my journey into psychology started well beyond that. From I think I was about 10. I went to just a summer camp in which they had someone come in to talk about what their careers are. And one person that came in was a clinical psychologist, and she was telling us about what clinical psychology is and what she does. And I thought that is exactly what I want to do when I grow up. So I held on to that and kept that through as I went through my GCSEs. And when it came to picking A levels, and I had the option of picking psychology, I did. Absolutely loved it, learned so much from it, and I knew that I wanted to keep going on with that. So then heading into my undergrad at university, I went to Royal Holloway and studying psychology there. But I soon realized in my sort of first and second year that clinical psychology maybe isn't the thing for me. It was very research and clinical heavy, and knowing myself and what I enjoyed, that unfortunately wasn't something for me. So I was sort of stuck in a bit of a, I don't really know where to go from here. And when you're at uni, when you're studying psychology, a lot of the main things that they tell you in terms of your career are like the big ones. So you've got clinical, you've got forensics. Those are the sort of big ones that they tell you. You don't really know about where else you can go. So by chance, I happened to come across a internship at a psychometric assessment company, which, spoiler alert, is where I now work. But I did a 1 month internship there and learned all about this whole other world of psychology that involves psychometric assessment, recruitment, this whole area of business psychology. And the business psychologists that were working there at the time, I asked them, how did you get here? Because this is where I want to be. And they said that, well, we did a master's in occupational and organizational psychology. I said, all right, great, I'm going to go do that, and then I'll come back. So I went on straight after my undergraduate, straight to do my master's at City St George's in organizational psychology. And unfortunately, that was during the COVID year. So it was a lot of sitting at home doing virtual lectures, which wasn't the best experience, but I did learn quite a lot. And it really cemented to me that assessment and selection recruitment is where I really want to be. Coming out of that, unfortunately, the company that I wanted to work for weren't hiring for the role that I wanted. So I also needed to find a role, but I wanted to find something that I could use some of the skills that I already had in. So I ended up working for a company called Group GTI. I started off as a recruitment coordinator, moving to resourcing partner, moving to client manager. So very much in the world of recruitment. And I just happened to end up working with Arctic Shores, my current company, for a client project. And then when the opportunity became available, I ended up applying and now currently work for Arctic Shores as a business psychologist. So it was about 6 years in the making from when I first did my internship there, and I really held on to it, and I really held on to them and kept up to date with them to now finally be in the position I am, working as a business psychologist, doing what I really want to do. I thought now it's the time where we can talk a little bit about what a day in the life of our roles looks a bit like. So I know with business psychology, assistant psychologist, those are just job titles. You don't really know necessarily what they're all about. So for me, in my day-to-day, specifically being a business psychologist at a psychometric assessment company, being a business psychologist can also vary depending on exactly where you work. But some of the things that I do, very much working with psychometrics. So these are the sort of assessments that you might do, like verbal reasoning tasks, numerical reasoning tasks, tests and things that you might do before applying for a job. That is my bread and butter. So I work with different companies to help them identify what good looks like in the roles that they're hiring for, so that we can make sure that they're hiring the best people for their role, the best people for their company. So it involves a lot of job analysis workshops in which I am talking to different customers about their roles. Following on to that, a lot of profile mapping. So once they've told me exactly what they want from people, I then align that with the assessment that we provide and make sure that they have a psychological profile sitting behind the assessment that candidates then asked to complete. I also do some other bits on assessment design, so whether that's coming up with interview questions, assessment center materials, group exercise materials, anything that is also involved in the wider recruitment process as well. I have a lot of customer meetings, constantly talking to different stakeholders, different customers. From some of the customers we work with are Williams Racing, First Bus, First Rail, Airbus, Ministry of Defence, loads of different variety of customers, loads of different variety of people that I'm working with and talking to on a daily basis. Another part of my role, because I'm talking to a lot of these customers, is also creating a lot of presentations so that we can really present to them, show to them what it is that we're providing for them and what services we can give them. And another big bulk of my time where I'm not speaking to customers or creating presentations is a lot of data analysis, which I'm using a lot of the information and a lot of the skills that I learned at uni to now be able to analyze that data and make sure that customers are getting exactly what they want and they are getting the most bang for their buck for all the money that they're spending with us.
Thank you, Hanisha. So a day in my life as an assistant psychologist, I guess when you hear the term psychologist, you automatically think about therapy. And you're right, I do provide therapy to under 18-year-olds at the moment within my service. And clinical work kind of is a range of things. So I could do group interventions, I could do face-to-face sessions with young people. I do a lot of network support, so network meaning with the schools, training schools and understanding mental health. Training with, depending on the network, it could be police involvement, it could be a range of parents, it could be foster parents, it could be all sorts. It's kind of mainly whoever's involved with the young person. Clinical also could mean that I'm also doing a lot of parent work, supporting parents to understand why children may need a bit more support, why they are being referred into our service, but also how can we support parents to feel contained so that they can contain their young person, which is really important, so that when we step away, then the parents can hold the child so that they no longer need our service. So another part of my role is research. I get to research into various different topics that I find really interesting. So one of the most recent topics I've completed is barriers into clinical research outcome measures and why can we not collect as many outcome measures as we think we could. And it streams into different areas, and this can lead on to service evaluations and eventually publications, which is really important for the world of psychology to just share the research and add it into the pool of how do we make our interventions even better than they currently are. I also do research for our team as well. So if there's a topic such as artificial intelligence and therapy, how does that work? Then I'm able to disseminate it. So be able to hold reflective sessions and talk about research and keep up to date with current research. The world is evolving very quickly. Therefore, it's really important that as a service, we've kept up to date with current interventions and how can we also just keep to date as ourselves and keep involved. Another part of my role is admin. I know it's not the most fun part of my role, but we got to do what we got to do. So answering emails, responding back to parents and other people, making sure that everything's up to date. Data is another important part of my role. So part of my role is to collect outcome measures. Outcome measures can show the change within therapy for a young person, and that's important because a lot of our funding comes from data. And then the data can also be used in clinical sessions. So if there's questionnaires, we get to explore if there is clinical improvement, then that can help us change. And if there isn't improvement, then that will help us identify, well, what could we do better within our sessions? A lot of our time is spent attending meetings. We have a lot of meetings to attend because we want to make sure that we are supporting our team members, also at the same time making sure that people are aware of our inclusion and exclusion criteria, making sure that we're also understanding other team members, and if we think a child may not be appropriate for our team, then where we can best suit them into another team. Not only that, we want to make sure that we don't re-traumatize a young person into the services. Another part of my role is providing reflection spaces or CPDs, clinical professional development. So I get to have the lovely role of being able to reflect on equality, diversity, inclusion. So I've created really fun topics such as names. Where does your name originate from? What about, your social graces, such as who are you? What does it mean to be who you are? And have some really good, lovely, deep conversations about that. Apart from that, I get to speak with a lot of variety different people within a range of different roles and lead on service development so that we can make sure we're providing the best care for our young person, but also for our staff members. How can we as a service also improve and learn from you all? So yeah, that's just a snippet of what I do on my day-to-day basis. Every day is completely different, and I will say the clinical part is my favorite part because I get to actually interact and do the therapy I'd love to do with a young person. And the therapy I forgot to mention can be a range of CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy. It can be systemic interventions, but all the interventions we do is always going to be fun. We get to do a range of different kinds of things such as arts, crafts. We can go for a walk, we can do anything to just get you interactive, and there's no expectation for you to have to tell me your deepest, darkest secret. We can move on. Yeah. So in terms of extra curriculum, so how did I get to where I am, but also making sure it's not just about academics. So in school, I absolutely loved music. I was volunteering in a lot of music bands, and I would have a range of different kind of interests with music, like composing, playing, practicing, and things like that. Apart from that, I also volunteered in different school clubs. So I was part of like charity work, so like Save the Children, and that's a great way to showcase your and start building up your transferable skills. Um, I also, on my own, I guess my own journey, I've started to really enjoy like traveling. I guess at school you don't necessarily have the means to travel by yourself, but definitely traveling is something, and you get to learn about different cultures and what it's like to not be able to speak that language, so you're able to learn other kinds of communication skills. In terms of jobs, I've had a range of jobs. I've been a nursery practitioner, volunteer. I've volunteered in different hospitals, special needs, as I'm currently now an assistant psychologist. I've worked in camps and a range of other curriculum and jobs. And Hanisha?
I unfortunately haven't done all of that. My sort of growing up, I was just very school focused. But I guess the main extracurricular I did that I found was the internship that I spoke to, and that was very enlightening for me. All right, so we wanted to talk a little bit about transferable skills. So we have a couple of examples up here on screen, but just to talk about really how, albeit, you might study psychology, you may or may not continue with that going forward in your career. You might decide to do something completely different. We'll talk to what different pathways that you can go down that aren't necessarily strictly psychology related. But one of the main things that you gain from studying psychology is a lot of transferable skills that you can apply to a range of different careers. So one of the things that you'll learn a lot in uni, or, whether you're doing psychology or really any degree, but particularly psychology itself, is being able to critically think and being able to analyze. So one of the biggest transferable skills you can learn and develop is not just from the content of the degree itself, but the ability to critically think and analyze information. It's such a key skill, especially in today's age of generative AI and ChatGPT, where people are spending less and less time evaluating the information that's presented to them. One thing about studying psychology is you'll be exposed to different ideas and theories on how the brain works and how personality is and how behavior is. But it's really up to you to understand that information and apply it to the topic that you're studying at the time or the project that you're working on. The same applies to, the real world as well. Being critical of the information in front of you, doing your own research and developing your own viewpoint is such a valuable human skill to have that we are sort of veering away from. But one thing that doing my degrees has really helped me is to be such a critical thinker and really evaluate the information that's in front of me. Sajni?
So a few important transferable skills is something that you will be developing over time is adaptability, flexibility, and then time management. Adaptability, flexibility, and strong time management are essential transferable skills for any career, but especially a career in psychology, because from the pathway from university, from schools, and into the professional practice, everything consistently changes. The policies are changing. You're adapting on a day-to-day basis. What you might think one clinical session might bring in can be completely different and will throw you off. So from early education, these skills help you adjust to new subjects, feedback, and exam pressures, which is essential to keep you on your toes within clinical sessions. At university, they become even more important as you are able to balance lectures, placements, research groups, and independent studies, and you're often juggling multiple priorities at once. Now, working as a psychologist, adapting and flexibility allows me to respond differently to client needs and unexpected change in risk or caseloads, or even within the service change. Whilst time management ensures that I can deliver safe, high quality work by organizing sessions, notes, safeguarding tasks, as well as making sure that I'm able to be present in the role that I'm doing and ongoing professional development without compromising any sort of care. I will say this, every day in my life is very, very different. And as mentioned, clients can bring a whole range of flexible and adapting, but also to be quick thinking.
Great. So I wanted to just also open it up to those who are live with us right now. I'll keep this on screen as well, the transferable skills, but which of these skills do you think that you've displayed in, at school, at uni, in your career thus far? Or what other maybe transferable skills do you think that you've already displayed or can develop further? I'll open it up and feel free to pop something in the chat. Time management, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good one. Especially, I think for both yourself, Sajid, and myself as well, being, what for yourself working with different, kids and parents, being able to manage your time with all these people whilst also doing training, whilst also doing the other bits that you're working on. Myself as well, working with all these different customers, managing all the different projects that I'm working on, really important skill to have.
I would agree with communication skills as well, because, for example, I'm talking with a range of young people, teenagers, not only that, with professionals, a range of kind of professionals, also talking with parents, so I have to adjust my language to make sure I'm not overcomplicating and using jargon that doesn't make sense to people. At the same time, speaking with my colleagues as well, making sure they all understand, and I'm sure Anisha, you do the same as well for communication. I think communication is one underrated skill that you will need throughout your whole life, no matter what career you're in. Critical thinking, I definitely agree with that, and that's more for university more than anything, especially when you're doing the research and like writing up the literature reviews. But again, that's the foundations of developing further. And I'm just wondering if there was any more else. Anisha, did you catch anything?
No, I think that's.
I
we've
think we
had
solved anyone.
All right, moving on then.
I did see a question about careers into psychology, so I'm hoping this will answer your question. So on the BPS website, I've put the link here, but if you can't reach onto that, then please just search into Google BPS career options, and it will highlight each of the career fields of what you can go into, just so that you get an idea. I know when I was at university, I just knew I wanted to be a psychologist. I didn't know what kind of psychologist, I didn't know how to become a psychologist, I don't know what it really entailed, but each kind of bubble on this slide highlights what kind of psychologist, what you will be doing, and how to get into that career. So as you can see, so in psychologists, there's also psychological therapists, which have very different training, and psychological practitioners, and they all have different levels of training. And how do I explain it better? And then you'll do further training to get to different levels. So from there, please do have a look at the BPS. And in terms of how to kind of get more understanding of what each person does, talk to psychologists. I think that's the best way I learned to understand what I'm doing. And even if you're not in the field, you can always reach out to people within the field. And we're always happy to talk because I know how hard it's become to try and get to my position in life because people just don't really talk much. You don't really see a lot of psychologists in the real world, hence our motivation to do this webinar. So yeah, that's just a snippet of where you could go.
For myself, as I mentioned, clinical wasn't necessarily the way that I wanted to go. But as myself as a business psychologist and with having done a degree in organizational psychology, there are so many roles out there that don't even have psychologist in the title that I could go further down and, specialize further in. So currently I'm specializing or working in assessment and selection and psychometrics. I could go even further into that and become a psychometrician or develop my own assessments. I could become even more of an assessment and selection specialist, really designing those assessments, designing assessment materials, different psychometric tools. Or I could go a slightly different route if I'm, sick of psychometrics and I don't want to look at any more tests. You can move down to sort of organizational and people-focused roles. They're an option. So focusing more on psychology within the workplace to improve culture, learning, development. So there's a lot of areas within that. So that can be talent management, that can be learning and development, employee experience. Even going to human resource business partners, that's another route you can go down, even, starting off with psychology and maybe realizing that a strict psychologist route isn't the way that you want to go. For myself, I could also move my career into a more data heavy direction, though I don't think personally, me being not so big of a fan of data, I will want to go there. But if I wanted to, I could go into behavioral science and strategy. Start doing some research, really looking at maybe behavioral scientists applying this different psychological principles to improve things like decision making and change business outcomes, predict performance, engagement, turnover rates. And more so with what I've learned, some of the modules that I learned during my master's, I could also go into leadership and coaching and go into, maybe a more independent practice and help people to become a career coach and help them to identify what exactly they want to do with their careers as well. And even something as if you don't want to work with, all such people, you might even go into looking at business and marketing and customer behavior that all stems from within psychology. So, doing UX design, understanding user behavior to improve products and services, the base of that is psychology. If you want to analyze customer behaviors and motivations and you want to sway them to shop in a certain way or buy products in a certain way, that all stems from psychology as well. So there are all sorts of different careers that don't necessarily have psychologist in the title that you can go down with a psychology degree as well. It is very varied and a very open degree, and the things that you learn are, as Sajini mentioned, it is the base starting point to then propel you into really whatever career you'd like to go into.
So I thought it would be really great to talk about, well, what I wish I knew and advice. I think one of the things I really want to highlight that the clinical route is competitive, but it's not unachievable. You can make it, but you need to know what you're getting yourself into. I think if I knew how long it would take to end up qualified as a clinical psychologist, it does take a toll on you, what you're doing in terms of your pay, in terms of how you're perceived and things like that. So I just want to highlight the clinical route is competitive and it will potentially take years, but it is worth it. And every point you do make, you're changing people's lives. I do want to also highlight studying psychology versus practicing psychology in a therapeutic manner is very different. Studying psychology gives you the foundations and understanding how therapies are developed, And when you do the therapies, it's very different in terms of you aren't using attachment models or cognitive models. What you're doing is you're learning, well, how they've been developed so that you can apply it into the practice. So things like that are really important, just so that when you do come into the field of psychology, you're like, well, this is not what I was expecting. This is not what I wanted to do. And that's okay as well, because I'm sure Hanisha will explain from her side, her experience.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the last slide, clinical isn't the only option that you have when studying psychology. I have old course mates from my undergrad and my master's who have gone on to do forensics and work with police force. They've gone into learning and development, looking at culture change, starting their own consultancies, going into HR, going into academia, becoming coaches, all sorts of different things. So clinical is not the only route. If that is something that you really want to do and you really want to work with people in that way, absolutely go for it. But just to know that isn't the only route out there if you're studying psychology. Another thing we wanted to sort of cover off is LinkedIn. Is a big one. Sort of having your LinkedIn up to date is really important. For the first role that I did when I was working at GTI, someone actually reached out to me for that role whilst I was job hunting and I was finishing off my master's. Some had my LinkedIn up to date enough where they reached out to me and they proposed the role to me and I interviewed and thankfully, I got it. But I was also actively reaching out to recruiters on LinkedIn and different recruitment agencies as part of my career search at the start. But as I mentioned, there are so many different roles that you can go into that don't have psychologist in the title. So just going onto LinkedIn, if you're in your career search currently or in the future, and you're looking for different roles, just searching for psychologist, you won't find as much as there is out there. There's a sort of a great network that I just wanted to highlight that you can follow if you are studying psychology and you want to, look for different roles, or if you're just trying to research to see what other roles there are out there that you might be interested in. It's called #PsychTalent on LinkedIn, and all sorts of different companies when they post their roles, and if it is psychology related, they tag it with that, so you can see all the different kind of roles that fall under psychology that don't even have psychology linked in the title.
I also want to piggyback on that as well, that psychology at LinkedIn is really powerful, especially when you're very new into your career. Speak to assistant psychologists. Being able to network and understand where people have started and where they've ended gives you a really brief overview of what to really expect. LinkedIn is also a great platform to really know who's in the area and being able to see, well, once you've become an assistant psychologist, then talking to trainees, a lot of the information is passed down through not what you know, it's who you know. So your networking is really important. It also helps you to start building up your basis. It's really great for when you want to do research in your doctoral level to become a clinical psychologist or counseling or health psychologist, that you will need a huge, I guess, network base to help you complete research and things like that. I think I remember when I finished my master's that I was like, what do I do next? I am so overwhelmed and I don't know how to get to becoming an assistant psychologist. And I probably cried numerous times and broke down. But that's because you are comforted by individuals like myself now, where I can say to you, it's okay, it's part of the process. A lot of the times it's the application process is challenging. You are having to write out any applications to NHS basically within hours because they shut down so quickly. So it is part and parcel of your training to get to where you want to go eventually.
Another thing we wanted to cover off is about university. So, of course, your degree that you pick is important, but really make the most of your university career service from day one. Make an appointment, talk to the careers advisors about your interests and your options. If you're studying psychology and you don't really know, which way you want to go to your career service. They have so much information. And even after you graduate, you will likely have access to them for a couple of years. So if you're still unsure of where you want to go, reach out to them, get some information from them. They have a wealth of knowledge of all the different areas of psychology, and they'll also have some information on graduates they've had in the past and where they've gone. I know I've had to fill out a couple of surveys after graduating where they're asking about what your current outcomes are. So they always want to know that, and they do track that going forward. So it's always useful reaching out to them. My view of what a psychologist was changed when I did my internship, and I only found out about that opportunity was because I was registered with my career service and they sent out this role to everyone. Otherwise, I never would have known, and I don't know how I would have gotten here if this is a path I even would have come to.
I think my take on universities, and I really want to stress this, is make sure your university is BPS accredited. So BPS means the British Psychological Society. If your university is not accredited with the BPS, you cannot move forward in your psychology degree. It is so important, especially if you want to go through the clinical route. If you want to do anything going forward in terms of doctorates, you need to prove. So if I put it in a different way, with medicine, you need to make sure you are a certified doctor. That's the same kind of equivalent for psychologists. Well, wanting to qualify as a psychologist. And I also would say, please make sure your university is GBC accredited. That's I can't remember what it stands for, but please just do make sure that you do have that accredited, because it's the same. It's important that when applying for doctorates, you can then verify that you have both, because if you don't, it's quite challenging to prove that you've got a psychology degree. So that's my only caveat, because I didn't know that until I finished my third year, and I was like, thankfully, that was all okay, because I knew I wanted to go into the clinical route. But I know for a lot of friends that didn't have that really have been struggling, because they've ended up having to do master conversion courses and different things like that. So please do make sure that's covered.
And also it's not just chartership isn't just for the clinical route as well, and going into that for myself, if I want to, that I have the option of going into occupational psychology chartership and becoming an occupational psychologist. But again, that is only possible because my undergrad and my master's were BPS accredited. So I have that base that I can then go forward and apply for chartership and work towards that if I want to. But it's a similar process that if I hadn't had done that, then I'd also need to do conversion courses as well to make sure that I have that base level before even going any further. So if you're at the point of picking degrees or picking what you do next, please make sure that even if you're not sure currently if that's where you want to go, just so that you can leave your options open for yourself in the future, just go for a degree that is already accredited. You're better off that way.
And my last piece of advice is enjoy the journey. No one expects you to know what you want to do straight out of secondary school and college. It's part of the process. Everything you learn within psychology is transferable. You are always going to be developing skills. It's not about where you go, it's about who you meet along the journey. I think I've met so many young, inspirational young people, adults, that have helped me realize that actually I don't need to run quicker into my future than I am currently now, because I enjoy what I'm doing, and that's the reason why I'm in this career field. So yeah.
Brilliant. So that's the end of our webinar here. We can see there are some questions in chat, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second now.
Do you want me to go through the questions and you two decide who's going to answer?
Yes, please.
Great.
Okay, I think you may have covered this, but I'll ask it anyway. How do you see the field of psychology evolving over the next decade? And what should aspiring psychologists start preparing for now?
Okay, great question. I will take this one. So the field of psychology is evolving, you are correct. And if you want to search up what is happening, the 10-year forward fit plan would be a great place to start. The reason why I say that is just been published, and it essentially it's highlighting three major shifts. The first one is talking about going from analog to digital. The second one is talking about going from, I can't remember the terms, but it's going towards preventing to community. So we want to make sure that a lot of the support is going into the community centres, and we want to reduce the inpatients flowing in. The third one is to improve well-being, something like that. Don't quote me on them, but it's a really good way to really have an eye-opening understanding of what's going on in NHS. Also, AI. AI is a huge evolving field. So how does AI look in therapy, for example? A lot of the children, unfortunately, due to our waiting lists, then result into utilizing AI. I'm sure everyone's using now ChatGPT to try and figure out some sort of way to help them in life. And AI can be helpful, but it can be quite dangerous. So I would say have a look into those areas. Also, find me on LinkedIn and we can have more of a deeper conversation. And in terms of what should aspiring psychologists prep for now, that's a huge question. I guess it depends on what level you're at. I think if you're at undergrad level, I'll start earlier actually. If you're at A levels, start volunteering. Get out there, get understanding. If you're at university level, start volunteering in NHS because then you'll get to know the lay of the land, as they say, and you get to know, well, how does NHS function? And that will help hold conversations. You'll get to talk to consultants, you'll get to talk to doctors, you'll get to talk to psychiatrists. Also, caveat, psychologists and psychiatrists are very different because psychiatrists can prescribe medication. Unfortunately, I can't prescribe anything. I don't do other drugs. And you need a medical degree for psychiatry. So hopefully I have answered your questions. If not, find me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to have a longer conversation with you about that.
Okay, the next question is how can someone figure out which branch of psychology, clinical, counseling, organization, educational, business, research, best aligns with their strengths and personality? And the next one might also go hand in hand with this. How can students test whether psychology is the right field for them before committing to years of study?
I think that's a really the really good questions. I'll partially take this one as well, and Sajani, feel free to jump in where you think helpful. I think if you're trying to figure out what branch of psychology, one of the things I mentioned was speaking to your career service, and they have that wealth of knowledge of what different areas there are. So just start reading all the different areas, start researching what different what the all these areas what they do. So even attending something like this where we've spoken about what our day in the life looks like, hearing if that's something that's interesting to you. And when it comes to whether it best aligns with your strengths and personality, if you're interested in it, you'll likely be good at it because you want to do well at it. So I think if it's something that is, you're reading into and you think, okay, this is something that I really like, or clinical is something that I really like doing, or educational psychology is something that I really want to go into. The more you read into it, the more you do research into it, the more you'll find whether you're aligned to that or not. If it interests you, then it'll be for you. If it doesn't sound interesting or there are aspects of it that you don't like at all, like if you're someone who doesn't necessarily want to talk to people about their feelings very much, as myself I am, then maybe clinical isn't the thing for you. And that is an inherent part of being a clinical psychologist, assistant psychologist. So maybe that's not the way for you to go. But if you really like to, how people are being assessed, or you really like analyzing data, or you really like that part of the psychology, then maybe business psychology is the way for you to go, or going into academia and research. So really thinking about what exactly you're interested in and utilizing your career service as part of that research too. And how can students test whether psychology is the right field? Oh, testing.
I
Don't really
think
know.
I think they mean like trying it out and
Yeah,
without committing.
I think going back to what Sajani was saying about volunteering, and speaking to those already in those spaces, and getting their experiences of it and understanding what their experiences are, and as volunteering, gaining your own experiences will be a good starting point to see if that's where you want to go. But with psychology, as we mentioned, it's yes, you have the degree, but with that, once you've done that degree, you don't necessarily strictly have to stay in a strict psychology career. You can go any sort of which way with the skills that you've learned, with the information that you've learned. You can go into people management and all the ones I listed earlier as well. But there's so much out there that you can go down with psychology and without going through years and years and years of training if that's maybe something that you don't want to do.
So just add on from what Hanisha was saying, that in terms of what would align to your strengths and personalities, so when you have your undergrad degree, the realities are that you probably will not be getting an assistant psychologist role off the bat because of the competitive nature. For example, a job posting for 20 interviews could go out, and within 2 hours it would have 200 applications. That's just highlighting to you the competitive natures of trying to just get to this role. So even before that, getting some sort of teaching assistant role or anything in terms of NHS-based roles, I would highly recommend that. I think from that, and once you've got experience as maybe an assistant psychologist, a psychological assistant psychologist, all these other different variations and roles, you will get to understand what branch of psychology you want to go into. So counselling, for example, counselling doesn't do the research and the data. Clinical does. Clinical does the therapy, clinical leadership, they've got a range of roles. And when you look on the BPS and when you click onto these bubbles, it will give you an understanding of what each career field does. Again, speaking to people is really important because they're in the field now. I would say a lot of the clinical psychologists I speak to, even on a regular basis, change because what their view and what they've gone through is very different to the next. So at the end of the day, it is coming down to your own personality and strengths. I would say journaling is important. Writing down your strengths and personalities is a huge task to do when you first start. But even myself, I have to sit here and reflect on who am I, what are my biases, what are my strengths and personalities, why am I in this field, am I allowed to be in this field? And things like that. It's reflecting on who you are. And once you get to know who you are, that's the best place to then know where you want to go.
Thank you. I'm just going to go back to the questions. Which skills do so this one's a good one. Which skills do psychology graduates often underestimate but end up using most in their careers? Both of you can answer this one.
I think communication, your empathy, I think it's very underrated. I think you can be amazing on your CV, but at the end of the day, if you don't have your interview skills, if you can't hold a conversation, if you struggle with just knowing what's going on in the world, those are really amazing things that you should know. I think the most common thing I hear from interviewers is that we don't want to know what's on your CV. We want to know who you are as a person. So build up who you are, build up your personality, have your extracurriculars. And I could go on and on and on, but I'm sure Hanisha, you might want to add some stuff to this.
Yeah, I was going to add what we mentioned earlier about that critical thinking and those analytical skills. It's something that I'm using daily. And now in my career, I'm constantly thinking about whether that is in the form of data analysis and, trying to understand what the numbers are telling me, what story is being developed there, or whether it's from reading that I'm doing of new research and trying to understand how that fits into what I already know, or if that changes what I already know. Having that ability to critically think and analyze is something that it's a really important skill to develop and to have in my career currently.
Thank you. So the next one, what key skills, attributes, and experiences do interviewers prioritize when assessing candidates for business psychology career routes? Sajna, you touched on this a little bit, but I think business psychology career route. So Hanisha, that's yours.
I think the main thing, and this is what I tell a lot of candidates as well, and I've assessed people for the roles in my team as well. The main thing being is motivation. As Sajni said, that people want to not necessarily know what you have in your CV, they want to know who you are and what you do. Having that motivation, knowing why it is that you've chosen this field, why it is that you are if you're applying to a certain company, why it is you're applying to them, what is it about them and what they do, and what service they provide that really interests you. The motivation is the key aspect that I hear from a lot of employers that candidates sometimes lack on, because either they've not really done any research, or they've not done that introspection that Sajini's mentioned about themselves and what their motivations are for themselves for the field. Or more often than not, they've used ChatGPT to give all their answers that they need and not really done any of that thinking themselves. And that is, employers can see right through that. So motivation, I think, is the biggest thing.
That's interesting, because we had a careers advisor, employability advisor, and one of the things she said is she's just in a position at the moment where she's being made redundant, and she was advised by their HR to use AI to apply to things.
Yeah, I'm seeing it's a bit of a minefield right now. Careers, unfortunately, whether that's early careers, whether that's professional hiring, it is a bit crazy right now with AI. AI obviously makes it, as a candidate, it makes it very easy for you to apply to all these different roles. As an employer, it is insane, the number of applications that they get that they have to go through. And it's hard for them to initially see how many of those applicants are truly interested in the role or are just applying because they've used something like lazy apply to apply, which is a really big one that people are using to
Okay.
apply for roles. You put in your details and applies to a bunch of roles overnight for you, but you might not even know what you've applied to. So it's different advice for different, whether you're an employer or a candidate.
I do just
AI is helpful, it is useful, but if you use it, there is a proper way of using it as part of your recruitment process if that's what you're looking for.
So I did want to jump in and just say, be careful, because a lot of the times you will have to, I think on one of the NHS applications I've recently seen is like you have to say if you've used AI, and especially when you're applying for doctoral courses, it will state if you've used AI, but they will know. So I would say don't.
Sajni, do you have any advice for someone getting their foot into the NHS setting as a recent graduate?
Yeah, of course. So NHS, I would say don't fixate on trying to get to like an assistant psychologist role. Start with the basics. Go into admin. Admin's a really great way, to understand what's going on within a psychological team. You get to understand what terminology is. NHS loves the acronyms, even like NHS is an acronym, right? So learn what, how, and who is in the team. So I would say definitely start volunteering, having the lower level roles, and then that way when you network, you can then, again, it's about who you know. They will tell you the heads up, oh, by the way, an assistant psychologist role is opening up, or this role is opening up. So, and then that will get your foot in the door.
Thank
And
you.
volunteering. Yeah.
Okay, both of you, in your day-to-day work-life balance, how do you cope in this field? I think this one, Sajni, you might have more to say than Hanisha.
I'm going to let Hanisha go first.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. I, being in a sort of a corporate world that I am, and in the role that I am, compared to what I imagine Sajini is going to say, I have a very cushy work-life balance. In that once my day ends, my day does end. I don't, it's not something that I take away with me. That is not to say that there aren't some days where, I've got deadlines to meet and I need to get things done and I have to work those extra hours to be able to get it done. I'm very fortunate to work in a company that is very respective of maintaining that work-life balance. So if I do end up working late one day, my manager is very adamant that I need to take that time back later on. But I think I've got a fairly okay work-life balance in the field that I'm in, thankfully, gratefully.
Oh, this question. It's a hard one, because I think on a day-to-day basis, I would love to say I end at 5, but actually my brain doesn't really switch off, because I would say you are the tools and the tools are you. And because I do a lot of the clinical work where it has a lot of safeguarding concerns with young people. You are worried. I think you build up your resistance and your tolerance the more you work in the field, but it doesn't get any easier. So, and I think that's important. You've got to stick to having that human approach and humanistic approach. But I think the more you enjoy it and the more you love it, the more you'll get quite good at it. But on a day-to-day, I will say it's exhausting at times. So your well-being and prioritizing your self-care is so important no matter what you do. So again, I could talk on for this, but I'm not going to bore you with the details.
Okay, thank you for that. I think there's no more questions. So maybe, as you said, if you're happy, people have any other questions, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn. Otherwise, if you want to send us any, oh, there's something new come on. Just a moment. There's a new message. I can't see it. Nish, can you see a new message?
Oh, I think it was Ritika saying.
Oh no, it's just saying, oh. Yeah,
It's
sorry.
helpful.
She's just saying thank you so much. This is really helpful. Ritika, did I answer ask your questions? I can't. Yeah, I did. So we'll wind down. Reach out to the Hanisha and Sajni on LinkedIn, or you can email me on obpn-we@oshwal.org, and I'll pass the questions on to both of them. So I'm going to say thank you so much for today. I believe I've learned a lot. I don't know about everybody else, but thank you both of you for sharing your experiences, honest insights with us this evening. Your guidance and real world perspectives, I think, have really been valuable. I want to thank our audience for joining us tonight, taking time out of your evening and your questions. We do hope this session's helped you to get greater clarity, confidence, and direction if you are thinking about careers in psychology. A massive thank you to our OA UK media team, Anish and Killit, for working so hard in the background to make this webinar possible. Also to Nish, who stepped in to support me today. Thank you. Before we say good night, a reminder that our next webinar is on the 25th of February on careers guidance for post-18. And on the 24th of January, we have a face-to-face self-development coaching workshop at Ecta Centre in Kingsbury. The first time we ran this a few months ago, it was oversubscribed, so we're running it again. So make sure you sign up. Limited spaces again. Details for both are on the OA UK website. So with that, I wish you all a lovely evening. And once again, thank you for joining us. And thank you, Hanisha and Sajni, for an amazing webinar. Thank you.
हरिहंत प्रभु ना दर्शन करना
ओम नमो हरिहंताणं
सिद्ध प्रभु ना दर्शन करना
ओम नमो सिद्धाणं
आचार्यों ने वंदन करना
ओम नमो आयर्याणं
उपाध्याय ने वंदन करना
ओम नमो उपध्यायाणं
सर्व साधु ने वंदन करना
नमो लोये सब साहूणं
सम्यक दर्शन मुझने मर्जो
देशो पंचन मुक्तारो
सम्यक ज्ञान